Hello, and thank you again for joining Sabre and our featured guest at the CAPA ACT Global Summit. And a very special welcome to all the audiences that's watching our live streaming program. We're very excited to have you here for these informative, and you'll see a straight talk on revenue management, followed by a revenue optimizer, our new product launch demonstration by the experts. My name is Pramod Jain. I'm the Vice President for Sabre Air Vision Marketing and Solution Management, where my role is to drive product strategy and product management for all our airline commercial planning products. And to begin, let me introduce you to our esteemed guest, the panelist, and our moderator. We're very excited to have Mr. Rigas Duganes as our panel moderator. Rigas is an aviation consultant and a strategy advisor to numerous airlines. He's also the chairman of the Aviation Club, Brussels, and a visiting professor at Cranfield Institute of Technology. Rigas is also a well-established author, having written numerous books on the aviation industry. On the panel, we are very excited to have with us the following guests that include Roland Jaggi, who has been with Aegean Airlines based out of Athens in Greece for over 10 years, currently the Director of Revenue Management, Pricing, and International Sales. Previous to Aegean, Roland held numerous roles at Swiss Air, including GM, Pricing, and Revenue Management. Welcome, Roland. Sergio Mendoza from Air Guru, co-founder and CEO at Air Guru, providing comprehensive pricing intelligence for airlines, helping them optimize fare structures. Sergio has been a senior vice president, spending 14 years at LATAM Airlines, responsible for revenue management, pricing, distribution, commercial systems, and innovation. Next to Sergio is Giorgio Caligari from Aeroflot Airlines. Joined Aeroflot in 2011 and is currently the Deputy General Director, Strategy and Alliances at this airline. Before that, from 1990 onwards, Giorgio held various positions at Alitalia, including Vice President for Sales, Vice President for Business Development, and Executive Vice President for Alliances and Strategies. Last but not the least, Sergei Shebelov from Sabre, Senior Director for Operations Research at Sabre, where he leads a team of 70 brightest minds in the industry, the OR research professionals, in design, development, and maintenance of decision support systems. Sergei is also a chair member of the Agiforce Scheduling and Strategic Planning Group and facilitates research collaboration initiatives with leading academic universities such as Tongji University, MIT, Georgia Tech, and Royal Institute of Technology. So without further ado, let me hand over the next 1 hour to Mr. Rigas.
Thank you very much. We're having a panel on revenue management, and it's called Straight Talk on Revenue Management, because I think that revenue management is at the heart of the airline business. And I can think of 5 very good reasons why we should be focusing on revenue management. Firstly, the last 15 years have been 15 years of instability in the airline industry. Don't be fooled by the good profits of the last 2 years. Since the beginning of this millennium, the airline industry has suffered many bad years and relatively few good ones. High fuel prices in 2008, 2014. We've had 2 financial crises, and the consequence of that is that airlines have put a lot of effort into reducing costs, and they can't squeeze costs anymore. The only way in the long term they can improve their profitability is on the revenue side. Secondly, small changes in the revenue per available seat kilometer can make a big difference in the profitability of an airline. Now, I'll give you one example. I've just spent 9 years as a non-executive director of EasyJet. A 1% increase in the revenue per available seat kilometer at EasyJet means a 60 million gain in revenue. What is 1% increase in RASK? It's equivalent to about 60 euro cents. In other words, not even €1, 60 cents increase in revenue from all sources generates 60 million in additional revenue. Thirdly, fuel price is now low. The airlines are doing well. but almost every forecaster tells you that the fuel price will go up. And when the fuel price goes up, the only response the airlines will have, they can't cut costs any further, is to look at the revenue side. Fourthly, and I think that came out this morning in the discussions below, revenue management is not just about revenue, it's about gaining a competitive advantage. If you have a better revenue system, a better optimization system, you have a competitive edge. And finally, and it's my experience being involved with EasyJet over virtually 10 years, is revenue management is the one area where technology and technological innovation can make the biggest impact on airline profitability. So there are 5 good reasons why we should focus on revenue management and how to improve it. And we have a distinguished panel, both from supply and the demand side, if you like, in terms of revenue management. And I'm going to ask them a series of questions. The first question is really to take a long-term view. Looking over the next 5 or 10 years, as we've been doing downstairs, in terms of business strategies, what are the biggest challenges that airlines face on the revenue management side? Roland, you're with Aegean, a relatively small airline, dynamic, successful. What are your challenges in terms of revenue management? Not now, but looking forward.
Right. Before looking forward, let's have a quick look what we do now. Today, we optimize revenue on a segment level. We have airlines like ours, we moved on a network level, we do O&D revenue management. And some of us airlines, we also do point of origin or point of sales, and that's pretty much it. If you request an availability from me, you will get exact the same answer as if you request an availability from me. And that has been fine so far. And looking forward, in 5 to 10 years, the challenges I see is I want to give you an availability you deserve. Based on what I know about you, I want to give you a price which may be different from you. If I know that Rigas always sits on seat 3 Charlie, I want to offer you not just a price for a seat, I want to offer you also seat 3A, because I know Rigas will pay me maybe €5 for seat 3A. Now Sergio's in Spain, who travels once in a lifetime on Aegean, I don't know Sergio's or I don't know him well, he will get another price. And I see there the biggest challenge in 5 to 10 years from now is really to serve every customer based on what I know about the customer and make a different revenue optimized price offer available.
But what if 2 customers want seat 3A? How do you resolve that?
First come, first served.
Okay. Giorgio, your long-term issues with revenue management, challenges?
Well, thanks, Rigas, and thanks to Sabre for inviting us to be part of this panel. If I may, I'd step a little bit back in the sense that I've read in a number of documents, and it was also published in publications that are distributed in the event, that airlines are now in a transition phase. Now, unfortunately, I'm no longer young enough to be able to say that I've seen a phase where airlines were not in transition. So,
in fact, a succession of transitions.
yes. So I think that airlines are always being faced with newer and newer challenges. Now, the good thing about the discussion today is that we are putting again the revenue part of the exercise into a prominent part of the picture, because for a number of years airlines have focused almost exclusively in taking out cost.
Well, that's what I was saying, that it was the high fuel prices that were driving us to do that.
Yeah, that's why I was saying I'll take it a bit, a step back in the sense that you need to do that. So you need to continuously make sure that you optimize your operations, because there will always be somebody that has new procedures, leaner procedures, and therefore that will come up with better cost structure. Therefore, you cannot take your eye off the ball of cost reductions. But if you don't fill your seats in an optimal way, if you don't maximize your revenue, then you'll still end up losing. So the big challenge is to balance what is, let me say, an efficient cost structure with an improved understanding of how you can maximize revenue.
But you don't answer the long term. Is that your long-term strategy?
Yes, definitely. That's if we talk about Aeroflot, that's the core of our basically multi-brand policy, no? Because in segmenting our product in order to cater to different market segments is obviously based on being able to offer the ideal pricing point to each of the various segments with each of the products. So definitely, that's one of our priorities for the future.
Sergio, you straddled both the airline side and more, if I can say, the consultancy, supplying advice side. Where do you see the long-term business problems being in terms of revenue management?
First, I think probably one of the most challenging issues happening already is consumer empowerment. I see consumer empowerment increasing over time, basically due to social networks, due to apps, very powerful apps, artificial intelligence, and so on. And that takes to the second big challenge, which is information asymmetry. Today, consumers are managing more and better information than airlines. They have access to information 24 times 7 times 365. They take decisions over the weekend when the airline is not working. And you see the information that the airline handles, the revenue management teams handle, and the software that they have available is very outdated, very old-fashioned, very inefficient, very user-unfriendly. So customers react much faster than the airline. They take advantage of the arbitrage, of the fare filing errors, for example, and so on. Third, with information asymmetry, you have also big volumes of data available. So you have a problem of complexity. Data is getting more and more complex as we speak. More and more data available. How do you handle all that? So it's going to be crazy. With Internet of Things, with Internet of People, and so on, there will be more and more data out there, and we need a way to handle all that. Current data is very difficult to handle. Imagine the combinatorial of thousands of times more data in the next 5 to 10 years. What are we going to do with all that? Fourth, public scrutiny and exposure. You were commenting on customer-centric revenue management, maybe, one-on-one pricing. Yes, they're good ideas. Retail has been doing that for decades. But every time it's more and more dangerous. You get exposed to all these discriminations. Customers are very empowered. They will complain. You need to justify revenue management. It's not just charging more because your customer has a higher willingness to pay. You have to justify why you are charging the customer more. So you better add value. If you charge more, you should add more value. And you have to demonstrate the additional value.
Well, that's the difficult part, isn't it? Demonstrating the additional value.
Very hard.
That it's you charge more on a Friday night than a Friday morning.
But it's not going to be easy.
I think key is not to penalize customers, but to incentivize. So if I know you, I give you an incentive. If I don't know you, I give you less incentive. So I fully understand and fully agree what you say, but customers are expecting us to move into the direction of we know them, and because we know them, we do value add plus incentive.
But Roland, I think the point made was, can you justify that in a court of law? I think that was your point, wasn't it, effectively?
Yes. And people
How do you justify that? We can see the logic of it as businessmen and airline people, but can you justify it?
not even going to a court of law. Today you are judged on the social networks.
Right.
They can kill your business in one day. Hundreds of thousands of people talking through the social networks.
Which is why you need to give an incentive. Your starting point is maybe 100, and I give him an incentive of 10, and I give you an incentive of 2. But you still get an incentive.
I think
My task is to still make you feel good that you're not one of those who pays 100, you pay 98.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do that.
No, I understand.
We have to be smart and
Yes,
careful about
yes.
Sergio, you outlined 4.
I have one left.
Oh, one more. Okay. Remind us, what was the first one again?
Sorry?
What was the first one?
Consumer empowerment.
Oh, consumer empowerment. Okay.
The last one I wanted to mention is emergence of disruptive business models and technologies. Okay, that's a big challenge because it's going to deviate revenues from the airline, from the traditional airline business model to new business models.
Well, what do you mean by disruption?
For example, the Ubers of the airlines, I haven't seen them yet. They may come. For example, robotic presence. Somebody from Accenture was commenting in a previous debate that they were using a robotic presence since 5 years ago. So their executives, their consultants don't have to travel to have their meetings abroad. We were scared at the airline 10 years ago with video conference, the emerging video conference technology. We were very scared. What's going to happen with business travel and all that? That was nothing compared to robotic presence on whatever is going to come in the near future in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So we better grab those, somehow think and see how we're going to prevent losing revenue streams.
Well, a lot of challenges then. Sergey, have you got the answer to these challenges?
Well,
Well, first of all, tell us what your challenges are.
all right. Well, if you don't mind, I'll expand on what Roland said and maybe offer a solution.
But wait a
Personalization
minute.
of a customer.
Well, I also want to hear your views,
All
what
right.
you think the challenges are.
Okay, so I agree with almost everything that was said, and I'll add a couple more. One is changing of the models, how airlines operate in terms of more and more collaboration throughout the world, alliances, joint ventures, and that creates both a challenge for revenue management because today the systems and the practices which exist are targeted towards individual airline. There is obviously more opportunities once airlines collaborate more and more. And the second one, which hasn't been mentioned yet, is integration of the different systems and different processes within an airline. Today, revenue management is still very siloed from pricing decisions, from network planning and capacity planning decisions, and to some extent from operations as well. I see that as an opportunity if we find out ways to integrate different systems and processes that will definitely increase efficiency and contribute to airline profitability.
Can we summarize that by saying integration of silos within the revenue side of airlines?
Absolutely.
Because that's what
Yes.
we're talking about. We're talking about silos.
Right.
None of you have mentioned integration between the travel and the hospitality side. Is that a challenge? I mean, we heard a lot today about, particularly in the early morning session, that, and it links to empowerment, that people are concerned not just with the flight, they're concerned with the hotel, the ground transport, and so on. Is that a challenge for airlines in the future, that they will need to provide all of that as an integral? And it's also a source of revenue, of course, because they can charge the hotel company for the bookings made on their system.
I think it's an opportunity and a challenge once the business model is created. I think we're maybe a step away from it yet. Airlines and travel industry and hospitality industry needs to figure out what the business model of this integration would be. And once this is created, then revenue management practices will most likely make their way into these business models.
So we're going to. What about generating additional sources of revenue, which I touched upon now? Isn't this part of the challenge for the future? Roland, Aegean doesn't seem to be that good. I use it frequently at getting more money out of me, even though I hate to say it. Shouldn't airlines really be focusing on maximizing the revenue opportunities and looking at things outside the simple fare? Of course, EasyJet is one of the airlines that has been very successful in that.
Airlines should, and airlines will do it more and more. And if I'm not mistaken, Ryanair has hired 200 programmers, and they're working full speed on that. And so do we, not with 200 programmers. But it is the future. Everybody talks about airlines to become retailers, and that goes beyond flights and immediate ancillaries you have on a flight. That goes into pre-travel and post-travel experiences.
But you don't sell seats yet. I mean, you don't sell exit rows or front seats.
Until now, we don't.
Okay. So, Giorgio, do you do that?
Well, if there was an important part of the previous question that I felt was interesting to try and answer because it also leads to this part of the question. Now, if people do not remember it, they should look it up in the internet, something which was called Allegis, and that I'm sure that you remember. No? So it was about 20 years ago when there was an effort to create an integrated group made of United Airlines, Apollo, so the reservation system, Hertz, Hilton, and combining into an integrated travel offer. We all know how that ended, so in tears and blood and loss of money, because the focus was not on delivering to the customer the optimal value across all the steps, but on trying to, get the customer to become part of that world, and then sort of milk the customer for his total travel solutions. What I think is essential is and that's the real challenge of the new revenue management generation, is again to understand the customer. So not to pretend to know it, the customer, but to listen carefully to the customer. And therefore, not so much the one-on-one as a way of targeting the 3C or the 3A, but the one-on-one as a way of understanding whether the customer really wants that seat or really wants that flight on a Friday or really wants that flight in economy class. And whether the customer wants the additional services that we are putting up for additional money. So yes, we do as a number of companies, and we've seen a significant increase of ancillary revenue for Aeroflot. So we do target that, but I feel that if we continue along that way, we're looking backwards. We're looking at just adding a shelf in your supermarket and hoping that the customer will pay more money for it. We need to change the approach to it, and I think that putting the customer at the center of our efforts is the right way forward.
Okay, we'll come back to that later on. Sergio, what is your view about how we broaden the revenue sources?
Well, I think it's important to look at those new revenue sources, not losing focus on your main revenue source. I believe airlines are not yet that good at optimizing their traditional ticket revenue generation, or they're losing control of that because of all what is happening around. But of course, new revenue sources are important. Also, new forms of generating the traditional revenue are also important. They are emerging. Things like auctions and options, for example, that I've seen lately, are interesting models that airlines should be analyzing, should be looking at. Again, without losing focus of their main stream of revenue. But yes, I think it's very important.
You say the mainstream, but an airline like Allegiant,
well, if you're a low cost,
very profitable, generates 35-40% of its revenue from non-fare. So what is the right balance that Aeroflot should be aiming for, or Aegean should be aiming for?
Depends a lot on your strategy and your positioning. Okay, if you're a low cost, of course, your ancillary revenue stream is much higher. But there is a big trend of self-segmenting the customer in every industry. So I think ancillary revenue is going to grow in every business model.
I think, if I may, Rigas, that's a fantastic question. So let me answer it in a straightforward way. We just, as Aeroflot, issued 2 press releases in a space of 2 days. One saying that we will carry skis for free, and the second one is that we will carry surfboards for free. So, and that is, at least obviously in our opinion, perfectly consistent with the idea of understanding what the customer wants and delivering that. So we have just a couple of numbers to explain what it means. I mean, in the first 6 months of 2016, Aeroflot has carried 10.4% more passengers than last year. Revenue increased 26.8%. So it's not because we are.
But how many of them are carrying skis?
Well, a good number of them. Because actually there is as the northern part and the European part of Russia is flat, and Russians love their skiing, they travel a lot for that. So listening to the customers, we understood that it made more sense and was more effective from a revenue management perspective to give some services for free in exchange for an optimized RASK.
Okay, the counterexample is Air Canada, which charges for skis if you're in economy class, but if you're in business class, you get the ski travel for free. So that means they generate more revenue from the economy cabin by charging for skis. Sergey, do you want to come in on this question of revenues additional to the basic fare?
Yeah, I think the right mix of additional revenue versus base revenue depends on an airline, on what type of customers they serve. And I think that's a solution for the problem Sergio brought up of justification of the price. If airlines learn how to understand their customers better, if they understand what customers value, in addition to just being transferred from point A to point B, they will be able to justify difference in prices for different segments of customers. And retailing is a concept that airlines are trying to adopt because the population, the new generation, is brought up on experience in general retailing that is very different from how airlines selling their seats right now. So I think it's an opportunity for airlines to move into this space, to become retailers, and technology needs to support them.
It's not just an opportunity. Customers will demand this more and more. They expect us to do that because they get it everywhere.
Agree.
And we have no choice.
But in the case of Aegean, what proportion of your RASK is from what I might call ancillaries? It's still quite small, I think.
Yeah, I cannot make too public statement about that. It is quite small, but it is not insignificant.
Well, that's a very diplomatic. Small but not insignificant suggests it's quite small. Okay, let me now bring the discussion more to the present day. At the current moment, for example, in Aeroflot, yes, how significant are the revenue management systems in contributing to the profitability of the airline?
One word, crucial. Because without a state-of-the-art revenue management, we would not have been able to grow the company the way that we've grown it. So a state-of-the-art revenue management and processes to ensure that state-of-the-art revenue management is properly leveraged is crucial to the success of a company.
In your case?
Absolutely, and it's obviously systems. I think that's the question you asked. But even more than systems, it's people. We invest a lot, and we keep investing into the revenue management team because that's where we make the difference.
How many people have you got involved in the revenue management? In
revenue management, it's about 22, and add pricing and system support and 32.
With a total revenue, what is the total revenue of Aegean?
1 billion, 12 million passengers.
1 billion.
much larger numbers. I mean, because and not necessarily comparable, because the revenue management team of Aeroflot also manages the flights of our subsidiaries. So the numbers are not comparable, Rigas.
Okay. Sergei, if you've been involved in watching management practices in relation to how they develop and use their revenue management, what are the best practices in terms of what you've seen?
So I think it does depend on the type of business model airline runs, what is best working for them. But I think, and I agree that revenue management was a key to success of airline industry. There is a few things that we do quite well with revenue management as a community. Obviously, it started as a way to segment customers, maybe not in the best possible way, somewhat artificial, but the major objective for revenue management was to segment customers and to utilize different willingness to pay, and revenue management systems and practices were quite successful in doing that. And then in my view, revenue management went through a couple of major transformations. First, we realized that it's better to maximize the total network revenue instead of looking flight by flight. And we learned how to do this, and we created systems and practices which allowed airlines to do this. And then second, with emergence of the internet and removing of rules on fares, we needed to learn how to deal with a demand where consumers going from one option to another, from one price point to another point. And there was quite a lot of development on how to manage this dependent demand. And I think we more or less figured out how to do this as well. So I would say network management and dependent demand management, these are the two good practices that if an airline learns how to do this well, they will be quite successful.
You raise a very interesting and important question. You said the key thing is to maximize the revenue in total, not the revenue per flight.
Correct.
Because I was brought up in the EasyJet model, there the focus was to maximize the revenue per flight for each aircraft, because once the aircraft has gone, the seat is lost. If you have an empty seat, it's lost production. How
Fair
can
enough.
you justify, or is it that you've been working only with network airlines and not with low-cost airlines?
No, what I said in the very beginning is that the best practice depends on what business model airline is using, and that was sort of prevent that particular question. For an airline which is running primarily local markets, leg systems are sufficient.
You mean point-to-point?
Point-to-point. For the airlines which have significant connecting traffic or significant partnership agreements with our airlines, it's important for them to understand how to maximize the total network.
Sergio, do you have a view on this? What should we be maximizing? Total revenue or revenue per
total
flight?
revenue, definitely. Especially talking about ancillary revenues and other sources of revenue. It's very important to integrate all the sources and take a transversal decision on the revenue maximization function. If you maximize the ancillary revenue but you lose your ticket revenue, then you're not doing a good business. You better maximize the total revenue you get from the customer. And that means network revenue, means ticket plus ancillary. It also means loyalty. You should also be looking at how you impact the long-term value of your customer. Okay, and so you have to analyze and comprehend your customer and take that into account for the revenue maximization.
That's why I said at the beginning, I think of revenue management not just about revenue, but it's also about developing a competitive tool, and loyalty is part of that. Sure. Giorgio, you want to comment on this question? What should we be maximizing?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with with the way you phrased the question, Rigas, in the sense that you need to target total flight revenue. So, but on a per flight basis. So if you take the ball off, if you take the eyes off that ball, then soon enough you'll find yourself justifying why that flight is losing money, why that leg is losing money, why that route is losing money, and justifying it based on, oh yes, but I have a total network revenue, I have a network contribution, I have such and such, I have an increasing loyalty system, and so on. And we know where that ends. So crucial, and that's why I like what Sergei was saying in terms of integrating the various systems, is that you start with the lowest possible or the most detailed point of analysis, and then you build up on it. But never, ever forget that, as you rightly said, seats are a perishable good. So if you don't maximize your revenue per single flight, then you might as well give up operating.
So we have a contradiction on the panel here, which is good, because do you want to respond to that?
Very interesting.
Sergio?
I also want to comment later, please.
Well, I think it's maybe different approaches to exactly the same problem. One of the ways to control total revenue or network revenue of an airline is to pay close attention to each flight. When we're maximizing networks, sometimes we might have to sacrifice individual flight performance, but we need to understand why exactly this is sacrificed. So we shouldn't be just assuming that some flights can be not profitable just because we're maximizing the total network. We need to understand the reasons. We need to understand the mix of passengers on these networks. We need to understand why these flights is important. I know very specific examples that airlines maintain flights which were consistently underperforming if you look at the flight performance by itself, but it was clear that these flights are a very strong contributor to a network, and that's why airlines continue to operate flights and even markets.
You say that, but Air France and Lufthansa have for the last 25 years been operating a domestic network which loses a lot of money. And they've been operating domestic sectors which cannot be justified except on the basis that they contribute to the long haul, but the long haul hasn't been making profit either. So, Giorgio was right. There's a risk in overstating the case for taking the whole. And as you say, quite rightly, you have to monitor very carefully whether an individual route which is losing money is justified because of what it can contribute to the total revenue.
Well, that's an important best practice. You should be measuring every month, every week, what is the contribution to the network. You should evaluate your flights based on direct revenue and on the contribution to the network. If you don't have control of that, of course, you will end up optimizing only flight by flight and losing the contribution to the network. So there's an opportunity to increase the network contribution. So, well, but having said that, I agree that working with network contribution is much harder. Mathematically, you can show, you can demonstrate, you can simulate that you get 2% extra net revenue to the bottom line. But in practice, it's very hard to make it real.
Roland, do you want to comment on this? What are you trying to maximize?
You can run an airline and you feel like I'm doing very well, I have network contribution on both sides of the hub, and you lose a lot of money and you go bankrupt. So you cannot live from network contribution. It's not possible. You need to have a core business which is on the route, which brings you profitability. You may have in your network destinations, markets, routes you keep, but your focus at the end of the day is we do O&D revenue management, we measure O&D values and flows and everything, but at the end of the day, every airline still has most of its KPIs is on a per flight level, and you measure if it works or not. So if you don't manage the core of your business on a per flight level in a profitable way, you will not survive as an airline.
Okay, let's move on. Or rather go a step back. Up to now, we've been talking very much about future challenges and how you move forward. I'd like now to switch the discussion to the problems today. What are the challenges that airlines face today? Within your revenue management practices, within the way you run the airline. Roland, do you want to talk? And it's Chatham House rules. Nobody will, if you say anything you feel is indiscreet, Chatham House rules means nobody can quote you as saying it, and if they do, you'll deny you've said it.
It's recorded.
I'm only going to say...
And I will confirm that you didn't say it.
Exactly, and we have a deal here. So,
Today, what are
today, it's the volatility of the external factors. We are not in control of the geopolitical happenings. We're not in control of terrorist attacks. We're not in control of the climate. And all these things, they have a massive impact on demand. And this is where we are challenged in revenue management. Actually, first of all, on the network side, on how much capacity are we really planning. And once we have planned the capacity, because capacity you don't shift easily, with all these changes, it's in 2 weeks, we have 1 year of the first Paris terrorist attack. January was the second one, March was Brussels, and all these things have had a heavy impact on travel behavior of Europeans for traveling within Europe. And all these you cannot plan, and your revenue management system cannot adjust fast enough, because these are really massive changes in demand behavior, and the revenue management team is trying to cope with it, but we have lots of data, but at the end of the day we don't have a crystal ball neither. So I see the external factors as a main element. Another external factor is capacities. Not, first of all, our own, of course, but there are so many planes ordered, and these planes coming. Ryanair is getting 50 planes next year. That's one every week. And let's assume they phase out some, but they're still adding lots of planes. So there are planes coming every week out of the manufacturers, and they're put into the marketplace. And even if Ryanair is phasing out planes, guess what? These old planes, they will still fly, just not for Ryanair. They will fly for someone else. So there is massive capacity coming, and planes will keep flying. And I see these two things, the volatility of the environment, of the demand, the changes, and the capacity.
Okay, let me come back to the first one, because you said, and you explained that the political changes, the attacks, and so on, and you said we can't deal with them.
I said we cannot control them.
You control them, but then you said we can't adapt fast enough to them.
This is the challenge we have.
Yeah.
Because you asked, the question was, what are our challenges?
Yeah.
And this is the challenge.
But is there something you could do to, or any practice you could adopt to be faster in responding to those challenges?
You just need to keep monitoring what's happening.
Day to day.
Day to day. The first Paris attack had a different impact than the second. Once we had Brussels, and that was within 4 months since first Paris, patterns changed again. You just need to remain on top of monitoring booking flows, change of booking curves, monitoring what are your competitors doing, and then just find the right balance.
And how quick were you able to adapt your offer in response to these changes? Because presumably what you're saying is that flights to Paris or Brussels loads were very low. Do you have the ability and the flexibility to reduce capacity in the short term?
Well, in Brussels we were forced, because the airport was closed and we couldn't fly anymore. Other than that, we are, you called us a small airline. I think we're a medium-sized airline by now, but we're still having the benefits of not being large. We take quick decisions. We move aircraft within a very short period if needed, and
Okay.
just to adjust. There are, in this volatile environment, there are very few holy cows. Obviously, if you have flights into London Heathrow, you're not going to move them out because you lose slots. But other than that, we're very agile.
In fact, one of your predecessors made a mistake of selling your morning slots at Heathrow, which was a bad mistake, what Olympic did. Giorgio, what are your challenges today in the way?
Well, I would echo what Roland was saying, even though possibly with a different perspective, in the sense that I think that as much as revenue management has been a fantastic enabler of a more effective approach to the market, where there is room for improvement is in what appears to be more and more the domain of OLTA, no? So online travel agents, which are very capable of steering demand, especially close to the departure date. So close to the departure date, I think customers are more and more stepping away from airlines and moving into providers that are arbitraging between
Offline agencies.
Yes.
Online agencies.
So that's the challenge. How to make sure that very close to departure, we retain the degree of effectiveness that we have in terms of revenue management farther away from the departure date.
That's your main challenge, you see.
Well, I think it's not only our main challenge, I think it's the industry challenge.
Okay. Sergio, do you want to comment on this? What do you think the current challenges are?
Well, hanging from what you said, I think stated in a more technical way, demand forecasting is a huge challenge, and it's going to get more and more complicated. Revenue management systems and processes rely a lot on the quality of the forecast, and forecasts are getting disturbed by external events with more and more frequency. They are lying behind because they lack information. There is so much additional information out there that the forecasting models don't take into account, that it's very hard to forecast and then to optimize your flights. So that's a big challenge. Second, I would mention price monitoring is a big challenge. The market is every time more and more dynamic. Airlines are getting more and more aggressive, online travel agencies, etc. The market is moving faster through many additional channels, so the airline has to be on top of monitoring prices with a much higher frequency and reacting faster. So that's the third challenge, time to market.
So
we have been analyzing ATPCO data. That's what we do with AirGuru. We produce insights from ATPCO data and other price sources. Airlines are taking around 10 to 12 hours to respond to price actions from competitors on average. So in 10 to 12 hours, you lose market share. And that's the average. And sometimes you take 3 days, 4 days reacting.
That depends on the perspective. If it takes the other airline to follow me 10 hours, I win market share for 10 hours.
Okay,
but all you're doing then is each pushing each other down.
Yeah.
Another big challenge I see is the speed of innovation. I think revenue management and pricing needs to be on top of innovation, needs to be testing a new technology and incorporating new ideas because the market is moving too fast. But it gets stuck with the internal bureaucracy of the airline. Airlines are spending, I estimate, around 70% of their IT budget in maintaining legacy systems. Big money to just maintain legacy systems, to renovate their hardware, to pay for software licenses, and to keep hundreds of people in IT departments taking care of the hardware and the software. Instead of spending 70% of their money innovating and testing new ideas and maybe having working with suppliers like AirGuru that can help them innovate at a much higher pace.
Giorgio, what do you think is your biggest challenge now? You mentioned one. Is that the real issue?
Yeah.
Because I noticed none of you mentioned integrating our operations with co-chair partners. None of you mentioned maximizing revenue from ancillaries. you have co-chair partners, you have alliance partners, you have joint ventures, or you may have joint ventures. Aren't these key issues which need to be integrated into the revenue management system?
Yes, they are. In particular,
but have you done it? I mean, effectively.
Well, as I said before, this rigors is sort of the same answer that I would give about airlines being in transition. So there's always, let me say, a room for improving. There's always something that you must have in order to perform better. And the ideal way is to identify that something that is relevant without chasing something that then ends up in being not so important. So yes, I agree with you that all of the things that you've listed, the integration with partners is very important. Why? Because airlines are becoming larger and larger, and they're investing more and more in their brands. So brand being the visible part of an entire product proposition, which is made of pricing, which is made of availability, which is made of onboard service, which is made of ancillary services. And letting that brand be deteriorated because you're not properly managing a relationship with the partner that has a code share with you is certainly one of the big challenges. But not only from a revenue management perspective, but even revenue management as the enabler of a consistent brand approach.
Sergio, do you want to comment on the discussion about the current issues?
I wanted to add something very different from what was already described. Revenue management has 30 years of developing systems and practices, and it's already fairly complicated. We are talking about new opportunities and the challenges which exist today, which means to solve them and to take advantage of these opportunities, we need to add more into the practices and the systems. And I think what the challenge we recognize is how complex the systems became, how difficult it is for airlines to manage these systems, to train personnel, to be able to conduct these revenue management practices. And I think that's another opportunity or another sort of a direction that we as a community need to take, is to simplify the practices, to simplify the systems without losing all of the advantages of we've been developed so far.
But isn't that a challenge? Because you mentioned earlier that one of the challenges was to bring the silos together into a single system. But doesn't that create greater complexity and greater difficulty in training people to operate effectively with a single system?
It does. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be advancing revenue management systems more. I'm saying it's a challenge to advance them, to address more and more of the business needs, and yet keep them simple enough so the analysts can use them and can understand what's happening within their system. Sergio mentioned the complexity of a forecast. It takes a PhD in operation research these days to understand what the forecast in revenue management is doing. And it's difficult for airlines to enable their analysts to use these systems.
Let me go on to one more question, then I'll ask for questions from the floor. And I'll address it basically to the two airline people here. And that is, and then go on to the others. Do you believe your airline is maximizing the opportunities from additional revenue sources? The additional revenue sources broadly may be ancillaries, but what does that mean? It means charges for baggage, charges for particular seats, selling on board, selling hotels, selling car hire, and so on. Mm-hmm. Are you maximizing that, Roland and Aegean? You said before it was a small but not insignificant, so that implies you are not maximizing.
You need to do first things first. And for us, that clearly meant investing into the traditional revenue management that is on the supplier side, systems, and even more important, on the people side. That's where we have clearly spent time and money, and that's where we have invested so far. On the ancillary side, if you compare Aegean's offering to what some other airlines are doing, we're certainly behind. We're also ahead of some of the other airlines. We're not an airline that's comparing ourselves to the people behind us. Obviously, we look ahead, and there is room for us to improve. There is room to invest. There is room to go forward. But just as Giorgio was very firm before, a flight must be a route must be a profitable route. I'm very firm about let's do first things first, and the big money is still where we look.
It sounds like Giorgio, you're in transition. Giorgio.
I'm transitioning from the transition.
Giorgio.
Thanks,
Are
Rias.
you maximizing your revenue opportunities?
Yes.
Okay.
But let me clarify that.
You don't really believe that?
No. I do believe that, but because again, we're talking to a group of experts. So let me, as I always try to be very direct. So when we talk about maximizing the revenue opportunity, we're by definition saying maximizing the cost side for the passenger, no? Because we're maximizing the revenue that we extract from that single passenger.
You're increasing the fare.
Well, no, the point is, are we proportionally increasing the value that we're giving to that passenger? And it goes back to the question that you were asking earlier on: can it stand in court, or can it stand once the customer asks, "What do I get in exchange?" So. And the way we do that is because we leverage the brand. No? So we say, okay, dear customer, you're traveling with airline A or B or C, which has a reputation for service and so on, and therefore you should pay more, or you should accept to be charged extra for this service, whether the service is provided by the airline or whether the service is channeled by the airline through a website to a car rental. No? Because how do you maximize ancillary revenue from a rental? By simply charging the passenger a bit more. So the point is...
Wait a minute, give him the option.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
he has the option whether to accept the cost of booking the hotel through the airline.
Yes, but why would the airline make money out of it?
Because it's providing a service.
It's providing a service and charging for the service.
Yeah.
That service is available through Expedia or Booking.com. So what is the additional value that you give to that customer so that he pays the airline the service for booking that hotel through you, instead of leaving the website of the airline, getting into the Booking.com website and comparing 200 hotels instead of comparing 2 hotels? So what I'm trying to say is, why did I give such a straightforward answer? Yes, we are maximizing the opportunities for additional revenue because it's based on our perception of what is the right balance between brand value, service proposition, and the money we charge for that. So first comes increasing the brand value, increasing the offer to your passengers, and then charging for that.
Okay, well, I have a different view of that because I've been on the board of EasyJet, and there we make a significant contribution to revenue from ancillary sources, and selling hotel beds is one of them. And it's not that we offer them a hotel. They get a link to a hotel company, which gives them a choice of hotels and prices and locations. But anyway, Sergei, do you want to comment on this? Are airlines doing enough to maximize revenues from ancillary sources?
I think...
Do they have the systems, first of all? They have to have the will to do it, and then they have... Giorgio doesn't have the will, I don't think.
No, we do. I said in a certain order, because I said that there is a priority list.
All right.
I agree with that. I think first thing first. So before we even get into the systems and practices, I hope that airlines will have more of a marketing and more of a creative way to provide more value, more services, generate new opportunities to serve customers, understand customers better. What is it what we're looking for, and provide this value. And once this is happening, we will be able to provide better systems which enable these practices.
Do you want to comment briefly, because I want to take some questions?
I agree with that, but we need to simplify. We need to simplify systems. Today, analysts spend most of their time looking at the data, analyzing, and very little time taking decisions and discussing the strategy and executing. So they are overwhelmed already by data and systems. So we need to work in the simplification of the systems, in empowering them with better and automated decisions.
So you're in favor of simplification and quick
Yes.
decision making?
Yes.
Simplification can help
Which
the
is,
decision process.
There's a trade-off, but if you're going to handle more and more data, if you don't simplify, that's going to be impossible.
But that's not the answer to the question, should airlines do more to generate ancillary?
They should, but not losing focus on their main revenue stream.
Okay. Well, let me ask a final question of the panel, and that is really, what is the next jump you want from the revenue management? I think, Sergio, partly you've answered that, but Sergey, you ought to answer this question. What is the next jump we should get? And then we'll ask the airlines whether they want it.
Well, I think we sort of led to the answer to that question by the discussion today. All the opportunities which we mentioned and all the challenges that airlines are facing today, that's what the next generation revenue management system should help to address. They need to help airlines to become better retailers and manage the total revenue coming from the different streams in the most optimal way. They need to be able to handle all the new data that Sergio was talking about, that is coming, better understanding of a consumer, better understanding of a competition, and be able to do it much faster, almost in real time, and also to make it simple for an airline to be able to manage a system like this. So I think these are the main principles.
I think there's very little to add to that. You've summed it up. Giorgio, do you want to... are we happy with that conclusion from the panel?
I think it's a fair conclusion, yes.
I second that.
Okay. Can you join me in thanking the panel? We've had a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much.